Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
I'm Joe.
This week, Ted the Foul-Mouthed Bear returns to the big screen, Max the Army Dog returns from war, and Blythe Danner returns to the dating scene in I'll See You in My Dreams. We'll also review Accidental Love in our home media moment, and discuss older films, Stories We Tell, Joe's old classic pick, The Iron Giant, and Best Picture nominee Babel in our triple feature of older films. We kick off this week's show talking about Ted 2, and a little bit of a disappointing first weekend, but let's see what Justin thought of Ted 2.
Taking place a few years after the original film, John, played by Mark Wahlberg, and his relationship has come to an end, and Ted's, on the other hand, played by Seth MacFarlane, has been leaning towards the same fate. The titular bear and his wife resolve to try and rekindle their relationship by having a child, which ultimately leads to the government questioning Ted's personhood and a legal battle with the help of Sam Jackson, played by Amanda Seyfried, to reclaim it. Morgan Freeman and Giovanni Ribisi, reprising his villainous character from the original, also star. I feel like at the heart of Ted, at least the original anyways, there's a bromance. It's not always the most kind and oftentimes even rather mean-spirited, but there's also a certain sweetness to it, I would say, just slightly though. Ted 2, honestly, I found rather depressing in that regard. We see everything that they were trying to build up to from the original basically say, nope, none of that matters now, and here's everything else. Let's see your characters become cynical wrecks and run from there in that regard, with a storyline that sort of just bobs and weaves through sketch to see where it goes. I won't lie to you listeners, I feel like there's a few good gags here and there, the best of which easily comes moments before the finale, and just about everyone's game for the goofiness. I never felt bored while watching this. But here's the thing. The first Ted, I would argue, was popular because of the shock value. No one was expecting what was going to happen with this incredibly foul-mouthed CGI teddy bear in the original, and even the poster for the prior film featured him holding his R rating proudly. This time, it's just, we know what to expect, and there's no real reason to care anymore. I left here and there, but when it falls flat, it really falls flat. Fans will probably be underwhelmed. Everyone else shouldn't bother. I leave with the C.
Joe? And Justin was the one big fan of the original Ted on the show, so
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what you thought, Joe.
I don't know. I wasn't really a big fan of the original, that is true. For Ted 2, I think like half the jokes work, but the film does not have enough confidence in its own plot. I mean, I think to call it a plot is generous, honestly. It really does bob and weave and coast. I mean, literally, there's like 5 plot points. I mean, there's the marriage, and then struggling with the marriage, and then there's proving he's a sentient being, and then there's a road trip, and then there's violence, and there's a revenge. I mean, there's too much going on, and obviously not enough of a main focal point to keep the whole thing together. The biggest problem with the movie, I think is a problem with a lot of MacFarlane's work, is that, you have to really genuinely like the characters. And there were times I liked them. Like, I can see some of the sweetness, but they're just mean. And, every moment they'll have Ted saying he wants to struggle to find his humanity or his bearity, whatever it is, then they'll have that scene where I know some people might have laughed at it, honestly. I think they did in the theater, where they start, throwing apples at joggers. I mean, I just thought that was mean. I didn't think that was funny. And I'm thinking, well, I don't care if you get civil rights. You're a bad person.
You're a jerk.
So that does kind of suffer. So for me, Ted was a very mixed bag. Performances were all right. I'm going to leave it with a C-.
Okay. Well, you really hit the nail on the head with that, Joe. Not only are there all these different plots sort of that don't even intersect with each other, but stick with a genre too. Is this a social commentary film? Is it a gross-out comedy? Is it a heartfelt drama? Is it a romance? Most of it doesn't come together or work. MacFarlane, as always, can't write to save his life. There are some funny gags, but even like the Neeson cameo was just like this.
Wasted.
It was stupid. I mean,
I will admit, I liked that one though.
Well,
I did.
But it was a Family Guy joke
skit
that didn't make it to air, so he decided to do it in the movie or something.
You're right. It doesn't really matter to the movie at all.
It matters not at all. He's
true.
Not even playing himself. He's just playing weird grocery shopper.
I think he's supposed to be Brian Mills. is what they were going
More or
for.
less.
Kind of his
I guess,
Persona.
yeah.
but it doesn't matter. It's
it honestly
it's
does.
stupid. And Justin, you're absolutely right. The reason that the original Ted was so popular is because of the novelty of seeing this foul-mouthed talking teddy bear. But here, it's just so lazily written. The shock factor is so ho-hum with it. Wow, another scene where they're smoking out of a bong. How original. I just hate Seth MacFarlane as a writer. He's okay as a performer. But even here, the opening credits with the song and dance number that has nothing to do with anything.
I will admit that was
Gimmicky.
too long. I was just
It was
thinking
too long.
you're literally
gimmicky.
doing Family Guy.
Yeah.
The opening to
Exactly.
Family
It's
Guy.
the opening to Family Guy, but with a teddy bear. I'm giving this movie a D+, just because, and like Seth MacFarlane, will like this a little more than I did. But I'll be honest, the girl I went with, she was very excited about this movie. She enjoyed the first Ted. We left halfway through, and I had to finish it later on my own because she couldn't take it.
Oh, wow.
She was so bored with this movie. The social commentary part was like the best part because, like we sort of talked about, Joe, with Million Ways to Die in the West, if MacFarlane had made that just a straight-up Western, it might have been interesting. I think the same thing with Ted 2.
Well, that's what I don't understand is that, like, I know that I guess because he's used to doing Family Guy, it's literally skip,
It's what people expect,
I'm
I
like,
guess.
if he could just do, like, a real story, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a comedy. There might be some potential.
I was going to say, he has some really good ideas. He doesn't always have to play at the shock factor.
It's like, you can try to experiment. Like, your stick is getting really old. It's been old
Right.
for a while. People know this.
Yes.
But I would also argue at the same time, and I feel like this is also evidenced in his gig as the Academy Awards host, shoot me feminist, I'm sorry, is I feel like the more prepared he is, the better his material is. Family Guy obviously writing very quickly. Ted 2, if memory serves, there was an article that came out probably a week or two before the film was released saying that the original plot of this was going to basically be similar to We're the Millers, and they had to scrap it and try and come up with a new story over the course of like a year.
Okay, well, if they had a year to come up with this piece of garbage, he doesn't need more time. I'll tell you why that I don't believe that statement is correct.
What's
because I do think he did a good job hosting the Academy Awards. That's fine. But where I like him as a performer is when he's hosted the Comedy Central roasts. And when you do that, you have to be quick on your feet because you have to comment on what the last roaster just did and the jokes that they made. He's funny with that. I don't think he needs more preparation. I think he's better on the fly, personally. I think he's a lousy writer. I think he's a funny guy and a smart guy, but he can't write.
Do you think he should direct and not write?
Maybe.
Well, that's just it. He is directing.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He directed this. Well, I mean, the directing wasn't horrible.
No, he's not a bad director.
Yeah, I mean,
he just,
I guess there wasn't
He knows how to
anything
connect
really-
his actors. And
Yeah,
tell
there
them how to place
wasn't
them.
anything wrong with that,
There's
really.
energy.
I'd say if you give him like 2 or 3 projects, he'll eventually find his niche. I think it's only a matter of time.
Did he direct Million Ways to Die?
Yes.
Well, and as we said, that wasn't horribly directed either.
No, I liked some
No, I
of
mean-
the performers were good. They had good chemistry.
He knows what
chemistry.
shots. He knows what shots to get.
Oh yeah.
He knows what'll get you
And he
interested.
had some good ideas in Million Ways to Die in the West. It's just he didn't run with them. Like one of my favorite segments of Million Ways to Die in the West is him basically debunking this romanticized vision of the Wild West that has been part of the American dream for ages.
Yeah.
Him just shooting that down in like a 3-minute cynical monologue.
Well, it had the same problem as this. It just kept moving. It didn't pick a direction.
No.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point because that's another example of his commentary on societal norms or whatever, in that case, with their love of the West. And here, I really enjoyed the commentary portion of this movie. What I didn't like was everything that was completely expected, boring, generic Seth MacFarlane humor.
You know what? I think he needs to rein it in.
I do too.
Like, he can still do his commentary and his humor, but it doesn't have to be all like gross out and flashy the way he always has done it. Maybe you just
Narrow it down.
be a little more serious. Take your time with these jokes.
Mm-hmm.
Let it sink in. Everything's just too fast.
Yeah.
Like there were random things that didn't work. Like the one when all like the animals get summoned because she's that random song.
That was so stupid.
You could cut that 5-minute segment out. Like that had literally no purpose.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I agree.
Just you can't tell me this thing is sorted out. They're okay. We got to stretch out the runtime. This will be funny, right?
Maybe it's not that he needs to rein in his material, but he needs a ruthless editor willing to tell him, no, this is a pointless scene. Use this part to build this up more.
Well,
because let's be honest, this movie runs on at least 20 minutes too long.
Yeah, but if he's the writer and the director, he's not going to listen to an editor unless he's doing it himself. You know what I mean? Like,
have you met Quentin Tarantino?
No, have you?
Oh,
touche.
Sounds like an interesting meeting. I would like that.
He probably funny.
Does he not edit it? Is that what you're saying? He doesn't edit his
he has
stuff.
He up to about Django, Sally Menken, I believe was her name, worked with her, and she was ruthless on some of the stuff he wanted in there, and she hacked Pulp Fiction to ribbons, and it became a better product because of that.
Okay, well, I don't think Seth MacFarlane has the wherewithal to listen to someone else. Well, Johnson, I'm glad actually that you like this one less than the original.
I'm glad you suffer is basically what
Well, yeah, I mean, I know I was in the minority on the first head. Honestly, I think the problem was that his ego got massively inflated because the first head was such an overwhelming, like, surprise success with a $60 million opening weekend that I don't think anyone on Earth expected.
No.
You know, so that gave him sort of carte blanche to, I can just throw whatever I want to in Ted 2 and it'll work. And like Joe said, not really.
Detractors.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on here. We've got Max up next, and that's going to be with Joe.
Max is a dog named Max, is the star of the film, and he helped U.S. Marines in Afghanistan and returned to the U.S. and is adopted by his handler's family. His handler did die after suffering a traumatic experience involving explosions. The younger brother, Justin, played by Josh Wiggins, who I've never heard of before, and the dog bond and have to contend with an illegal arms deal going on in their hometown. Thomas Hayden Church plays Justin's hard-edged father. Let's see what my notes say. Okay, annoying racist character. There's this...
The Mexican friend.
There's this Mexican friend who says B every sentence, like in the most dated slang ever. Literally, this character is just a racist caricature. I mean, I don't know how this happened in a family film. I wonder if you guys can counter that at all.
No.
It's okay. Thank you.
Nah, it wasn't a great
He's
character.
horrible.
He was a pretty terrible character. He didn't add anything. I thought the acting wasn't really that good for most people here. I really didn't think that the acting was that great. It was like mediocre at best. Even from Church, who was like trying. He had some fairly decent scenes, but you can tell there's not much to work with here in terms of the script. My biggest problem, though, was that in this movie, there are just some really questionable plot points. Like, his older brother's former trainer that helped train the dog, gives him classified training videos, like, on the fly, and then calls him later when he's looking into the villain, like, man, you shouldn't talk to these people. Like, you should be calling his parents, if anybody. I gotta tell you this classified information again. I'm just like, well, that wouldn't happen at all. And this movie's just very uneven in terms of the crime story, the war story, coming of age. It's an adventure story, family film. And yet there's death and murder and bad acting.
A lot of gunplay.
A lot of gunplay. It's not quite sure what it wants to be, and that's definitely a problem. But there are some scenes that do work. I think that some of the stuff with Max, it's kind of hard not to like the dog. I think dog's probably the best performer in the movie. But it doesn't really hold together because it doesn't have the acting. It doesn't have a particularly solid script, and it's just uneven overall. So I leave this one with a C.
Okay. There is a lot of subpar acting here. I thought the kid was okay. I do agree that Thomas Hayden Church was a bit off his game here.
Sleepwalking.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, I know you love the guy. You're a bigger fan, I think, than I am, but...
It's probably the worst performance I've ever seen him give.
Yeah, I haven't seen him give a worse one than this. I thought Lauren Graham as the mom was doing okay. Her southern accent was...
Weak.
was a little hit or miss. God bless her. But you're right. The absolutely ridiculous plot holes is where this movie really kind of falters.
A little bit.
Especially in what happens at the tail end of the movie. But when all is said and done, it really does tug at some heartstrings along the way. I can't forgive it for a ton, but it definitely wasn't boring.
That's true.
But I do have to knock off a point for that absolutely awful song at the end that they bust into about America.
Yep.
I can't.
That was too much.
So I was with you, Joe, with the C up until the song came on.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to leave it just a shade under you with a C-.
I'm okay with that.
Justin, how about for you?
Dogs in the military, I think, are an important aspect to how how we handle these foreign affairs today, and I think it is something that is deserving of a movie. Max is not the one to be leading the charge. When this movie isn't taking a page out of the American Sniper, America good, everyone else bad playbook.
True.
We get this incredibly lazy, plot hole ridden, poorly acted piece of dreck that's so ridiculously Hollywoodized that I can only really describe it to our listeners as Lassie meets Taken.
Kind of.
Seriously, they make Max quite possibly the world's most overpowered dog you will ever see in cinema.
Which he's more like a John Wick or Equalizer dog then? Because Brian Mills is powerful, but, I feel like he got captured,
So did Max. Max broke out.
He did.
But, I mean, the plot holes are in abundance. It gets super dark at times. There are so many inconsistencies. And then they try to bring it back into this, pro-America, support your troops.
It was horrible.
Which I understand and I get. But if you're going to do that, give us a more honest, down-to-earth military dog story. Don't give us this ridiculous kids movie masquerading as a thriller.
It's what it was.
It's not for children.
No.
Not young children, anyway. It's a lot of death and gunplay.
But it's totally trying to be a family film.
I know.
When it's not.
Yeah, it was at odds with itself.
But overall, this was just a mess. I want to give it a D+ strictly because I do think it is an interesting subject matter. I think there are a couple moments where it really is on par, particularly the fireworks scene, which I think is quite possibly the best scene in the entire movie. Mm-hmm. But it is just so problematic.
Do you leave it with a D+?
I do leave it with a D+, that's correct.
It's actually higher than I thought you would be, Justin.
Well,
What were you predicting, just out of curiosity?
Actually, I was pretty good D- for you.
Oh, wow.
I did hate the kid, and I did hate the racist character.
I knew you would hate the kid. I thought the kid was okay.
Well, the thing about the kid is, I feel like he has this particular way of... He's trying to play one thing, just kind of this angsty kid. Mm-hmm. But the problem is he can't break out of that, and he kept Shatnering. He kept, just kind of looking over, and obviously... I didn't quite get... See, I didn't want to say he was a terrible performer, but you can tell this kid's very green. He's very green.
I was thinking that... I actually think that was more of a director issue.
Because, why is he doing this?
Because I feel like the
time?
director literally just told him,
look at the camera.
Not look at the camera. Just look sour and look...
Upset.
He was twitchy and
look peeved at everyone.
Literally, almost every scene, he was exactly the same.
I mean, literally, it was like the director said, "Look like you're over it." In every scene, and he just the scowl on his face
never went away.
Never. I mean, it finally did once him and Max became buddies, but for the first half of the movie, especially any scene with Thomas Hayden Church, who I also don't think was directed very well.
Yeah, you could tell he was trying. But there was something off about this performance.
You could clearly tell he wanted to be a part of this, and he was trying to say something about it. But
it's what am I...
His mustache was awful.
His
mustache was...
Whoever made that decision, no.
Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah, sorry, that was pretty bad. I actually liked the military stuff. I thought that was the strongest in the movie. I liked the bond with his brother. I feel like if we had gotten...
that was okay.
If we got more of that...
It didn't belong in this movie, though.
But it's what the movie's about, though.
I know.
In
theory.
Which is the problem, because the one thing the movie's marketing to do, as Justin said, is the least important thing. It's this weird bonding with the dog and stop the illegal arms dealers and dad issues, and it's a family film trying to be a thriller.
I mean, the opening scene is a lot of murder on the battle zone. That just does not scream PG to me.
It's not.
How do we show children the aspect of the war on terror through the dog's perspective in a way that's
it opens up as a mediocre war movie.
It really does.
And it's I'm you're right. I remember thinking that too. This is a kids movie?
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right, well, let's move on here. Up next is I'll See You in My Dreams. In this film, Carol, played by Blythe Danner, has long been a widow, and now she loses her beloved dog as well. Left with just her girlfriends, played by June Squibb, Rhea Perlman, and Mary Kay Place, she decides it's time to get back into the dating game when she meets Bill, played by Sam Elliott, at the same time that she strikes up an unlikely friendship with her pool boy, Martin Starr. I'll See You in My Dreams is a subtle yet genuine piece with a great performance from Danner, not slowing down at all in her elderly age, but rarely taking center stage like this. We see her pop up from time to time in TV roles or a supporting role in a movie, but she really is at the center of this film. But the problem is, it has such a short running time, there just isn't time to flesh out really any of the storylines, least of which is this shoehorned in reconnection with her daughter plot, played by Malin Ackerman. It just leaves the viewer high and dry with any sort of details that we sort of maybe wanted in any of these plots. So I'm going to leave it with a B. Justin?
You actually won't hear too many rebuttals from me on that one.
Okay.
It's really a character study that benefits from having a great lead. Danner is completely and utterly up for the challenge, and I think it's a fantastic performance. Just out of curiosity, Dan, where else does she pop in from?
I mean, she played Will's mother on Will and Grace in a handful of episodes. I saw her in this miniseries on NBC called The Slap not too long ago. She has a movie in the works coming out later this year. She's done a lot of stuff on Broadway as well. Okay. So she gets around.
Well, that explains the singing then.
Yeah, that's true. Yep, she has a little karaoke subplot in this.
Yeah. But I mean, you're absolutely right, Dan. The movie is incredibly rushed, and I feel like that's one of the biggest issues I had about it. I felt it took about 15 to 20 minutes to get going because it was trying to establish her routine, which was fine. It justified everything that was going to come. But
and tackle a little comedy here and there that it didn't necessarily need to.
It didn't necessarily need, but I also didn't mind anyways. Rhea Perlman's always great. So is Jude.
Well, that's true.
And so is June Squibb. But I would think if it was like even 20 minutes longer, we would have had more time with these characters and getting to the more emotional aspects of this movie that it's really striving for would have made a world of difference. Instead, it's good. It's got a great performance. And it does have a couple very heartfelt moments, but it's only just there. I leave it with a B as well.
Yeah, Sam Elliott she doesn't meet him at the speed dating. She sort of meets him elsewhere, but he pops up a couple of times, and so finally he's like, let's exchange numbers, I'll call you, whatever. And then he finally calls her, they go on this date, and then he literally is in like maybe 2 more scenes in the whole movie.
Yeah,
like it comes and goes so quickly. And then same with Martin Starr, like we see them strike up this friendship, they go to the karaoke bar together, and then as soon as she starts dating Sam Elliott, we don't see him again for like a half hour. And then he kind of pops up again towards the end, and then Malin Ackerman we don't even know she has a daughter for the first like hour.
Yeah, that was a bit odd. How did you feel about that sort of platonic relationship between her and her pool boy?
I thought it was a little bit odd that it just sort of came out of nowhere, which might have benefited from a little more time, devoted to their characters, like we've been saying about this whole movie. But I don't know, I thought it was sort of sweet in a way.
I mean...
sort of maybe...
Connecting, I guess.
Well, I just sort of chalked it up to maybe he just lost his mother or his grandmother, and so he was sort of looking for, a motherly figure, and she obviously was just looking for a companion. I like that never really at all was it made, like, even as a joke, like, oh, you're hitting it with your pool boy...
Sort of ish, but
a little bit, but not really. I mean, it was pretty platonic.
Oh yeah,
from the start.
No, I mean, there's moments where they hint that they may have been trying to go for more, but you can clearly tell that it's definitely Danner and Elliot.
Right.
For me, I wish he wasn't reduced to so much quirk. Because it's like, oh yeah, I'm a pool boy, but I'm trying to get out and do something else, and I'm a pool boy again. It's like.
Well, the humor wasn't great in this movie, to be honest. I mean, it had a couple of scenes, but yeah, I think maybe he was a little too quirky. That's acceptable.
I feel like it's funny in a way that movies like Lars and the Real Girl are funny. Like, you can relate to them, but they're not exactly like busting gut laughter.
Yeah, that's true. I have to say though, and Joe didn't get to see this movie. We're not just ignoring him in his review. Joe, you probably don't need to. It's
hey,
it's okay for what it is.
I did try to see it, but yeah. It must have been a big hit because that big rainy day, everybody came out to see it at the little Middletown Theater.
Yes, they did.
It's pretty packed. So it wasn't for lack of trying. Sam Elliott was in it.
Sam Elliott is always good. But I'm sort of sick of the the old people taking pot as a punchline for a whole scene. Like, It's Complicated did it, and Roseanne did it, and, we've seen it so many times. And Ted, it wasn't old people, but half the movie of Ted was look at the funny bear smoking weed.
It's going to be legal soon anyway for everyone, so it's not going to be funny.
Yeah, it's not even... Yeah, you're right.
Honestly, the way we're heading.
Well, and in the movie, was it Rhea Perlman's character, I guess it is, has the medical marijuana, so that's how they all get it, and let's go get high and go to the grocery store.
Soon, that's not going to be that funny anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree.
Well, you're getting high, so am I. Yeah.
What else is new?
So it was like, that was their, like, big push for humor in the middle of the movie. And it was just like 5 minutes that, I don't know, they just didn't need, really. Focus that 5 minutes...
Building the relationships.
Yeah, on other storylines with the relationships. So, all right. Well, up next is our home media moment, and that is accidental love. Justin?
Jessica Biel plays small-town girl Alice Eckel, who in an unfortunate accident gets a nail lodged into her head that causes her behavior to become completely unpredictable. However, when she can't afford the surgery to get it removed, Alice decides to march on Washington with the help, or lack thereof, from Senator Howard Birdwell, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, to stand up for those with equally bizarre injuries and get insurance. This is one of those films that plays out like a horribly bad pitch you would make for a movie at a bar and wait for someone to laugh at how ridiculously stupid it is. Unfortunately, no one had the ability to tell David O. Russell who can run, but he certainly can't hide this, and just is a complete and utter disaster. I heard about this movie some time ago, back when it was under the title Nailed, and it was getting shelved, and it went over budget, and just about everyone associated with the movie was leaving in some way, shape, or form. And I was thinking at the time, would this ever actually see any form of a release? But it was just so much worse than anyone was predicting. It's just dumb, it's plot hole ridden, it's nightmarishly acted. I don't know how they got as many people as they did in this movie. And even the social commentary-ish, I guess, on health insurance is dated and basically garbled, if anything, to say it politely. This movie is a nightmare. It's easily the top 3 worst movies of 2015. I leave it with an F.
Of course it's dated. It was written 7 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it was dated before it hit the screen. Joe, how about for you on Accidental Love?
I must have misunderstood what this movie was, because I was actually really interested in it. I remember the title Nailed, and I just pictured like I thought when getting the nail stuck in the brain, I thought that was like an actual like nail, like somebody tried to murder them, and then it was like some sort of weird horror movie. So I went into this with
interesting.
No, that's just, I remember briefly talking to Justin about it. For some reason, that's what stuck in my mind. So yeah, it's not that at all. It's a kind of a bizarre comedy. Well, first I just want to say, Jessica Biel, it's been a long time since The Illusionist. I think you can go for
those days are well behind her.
Should go for some better movies.
Although not when this was made. It was probably only 2 years after The Illusionist.
Well, then,
to be fair,
then what direction did you go? I don't know.
Yeah.
But whatever. A much better movie you should check out, people. But I would describe this movie, other than being incredibly dumb, it's a soulless comedy. There's no fun here. The jokes are mean-spirited. The delivery from everyone is pretty much terrible or hammy. I was losing interest almost immediately. And saddest of all, it's just not very funny. And I mean, for a comedy to be marketed this way, that's the worst thing you could say. Mm-hmm. This movie is a bore. It's painful. It's stupid. And it's a mess. And it's a shame that there were a lot of talented people in it. I was seeing Marsden, among others.
Yeah.
Gyllenhaal. I mean, you could tell there's something in there somewhere, but it is a complete mess of a movie. And I'm going to give it an F as well. I thought it was difficult to get through, honestly.
There really is not one redeeming thing about this film. I mean, the situations are incredibly unfunny. Mm-hmm. It's horribly acted. From you guys both said it, typically good performers. I mean, Catherine Keener is in this. You guys both mentioned Gyllenhaal, James Marsden, obviously. It's so easy to see why David O. Russell wants to pretend that it doesn't exist, because it shouldn't. It never should have existed. I think you have to feel like with a cast like this, Justin, it was going to see the light of day at some point. I mean, there's so many big names in this movie. The curiosity factor alone will make people go out and get this movie. But do you realize this had a $26 million budget?
I did, actually.
And it made less than $500,000 in theaters.
Yep.
So,
That's a waste
and that
of
was
money.
after 7 years. So
Yeah.
it's awful. Obviously, it's an F for me as well. What is there good about this movie?
Virtually nothing. I mean, maybe if they had narrowed in on the health insurance commentary, we could have got something moderately poignant, say 3-4 years ago. But now it's just so ridiculously old hat. There's no point to it.
But it doesn't seem like it even wants to be smart in that regard.
Actually, it's pretty lowbrow.
It's one of the dumbest comedies I've seen in a long time.
But it's trying to be
Just on a
so-
basic level.
Yeah, the
you know?
situational stuff was...
And honestly,
Bizarre.
listen, I brought this up when the three of us gave Outcast an F just a couple of weeks ago. I know we all gave Paul Blart 2 an F, but I have to give Paul Blart this. It wasn't trying to be anything
Other than
but what it was. You know? This movie, if it was trying to do some kind of commentary on the healthcare, it fails so miserably. It just... And maybe you're right, Justin. Maybe they were going for something like that.
Well, I mean, also bear in mind there were so many reshoots that it could have been a incredibly different story than at the start than what we initially ended up with in the end game.
Mm-hmm. Sort of like movie 43, where it's like there's all of this good talent. How did any of these people sign on for this?
Favors.
Yeah, like you have to think, you know.
Oh, somebody-
Well, Gyllenhaal was probably a favor, right? I Heart Huckabees,
yeah, probably.
you know.
Yeah.
So okay, yep, don't go see that.
No, don't.
It's a shame because David O. Russell, I've long stated on the show, is one of my favorite recent directors between The Fighter and Silver Linings and American Hustle. But yeah, this is just a disaster. All right, well, before we get into our triple feature of older films, we've got some upcoming movie news and board game news, I suppose.
Of course.
About the Monopoly movie that is now has gotten greenlit and is underway. Justin, what can you tell us about the Monopoly movie?
Okay, well, since it's been announced, we now have Andrew Niccol, who gave us the delightful movie The Host, penning the script for a Monopoly movie.
Another triple F from us, by the way, The Host.
Not denying that. To give the man a little bit of credit, he did have his time. He did The Truman Show. He did Gattaca.
Yeah.
He's definitely a better director than The Host might lead some people on to believe. What's interesting about this is I remember hearing about this originally. Ridley Scott apparently was attached to it way back when. It sounds bizarre, I know.
I can just picture it now, all gray and serious and murder.
Yeah, it was like supposed to come out back when the recession was in full swing. I mean, like some sort of like social commentary thing. I don't know what happened. And
I just don't get this. I'm sorry. Do we have like the Parker Brothers on speed dial with these movies? Like, remember Sandler was going to do a Candyland movie at some point.
I do remember that.
And I haven't heard anything about that in a couple of years.
Well,
so hopefully that's died on the vine. But
Look, okay, we all know Hollywood's going for franchises now, so if it's not superheroes or YA or adaptation to something else or sequel to something else, we go for toys. They think Hasbro, Transformers, success. So, hey, we can make a toy movie about anything, right? That's the logic here. That is the logic here.
Hey, I'm still waiting for the gritty Rainbow Bright movie. I'm just saying.
But Battleship was so nothing like the board game at
pegs.
all.
It pegs.
Yes,
It
they
pegs.
pegged. They threw pegs. They shot pegs at people with their
Dan,
peg guns.
if they did
okay.
if they tried to stick true to the source material, it would just be some Marines that shot giant pegs as a new weapon. They had to stick in the aliens to make it more interesting, I suppose.
Oh, I know, but I just... I mean, okay, I'll give you this. Monopoly at least has a lot going on. You're right. Battleship is literally you put pegs in a hole, and then people guess what the thing is. And they did guess what the coordinates were.
Yeah.
Oh, is he in section B3, sir? And then Rihanna says, oh, I don't know, whatever.
They sunk our battleship.
God. But you're right. Monopoly at least has more to go on. Listen, Clue was a great movie.
Was.
Yeah. That's 10.
30 years ago. I can't think of one since that, I mean, I guess the first Transformers movie is okay.
That's all right.
But
It's fun.
I feel like, what is the point of this? Other than, brand recognition, I don't know. The director I'm all right with. I love The Truman Show.
Yeah.
I never saw Gattaca. I know.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, I know Joe's a big fan.
It's a good movie, yeah.
Obviously, we all hate the host. So he's writing this. Has anyone signed on to direct this yet?
Not to my knowledge. I think they're just working on the script right now.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I certainly feel like it has more to go on than a Candyland movie, but...
I don't know. I feel like Candyland could be visually interesting, at least.
I still feel like, though, if they're shooting for that original, social commentary on the economy thing, it's just not going to work.
I mean, I don't really have a lot of faith in it, but you look at something like the Lego Movie, which could have easily just been a big commercial.
That is true.
And that was a very highbrow,
You're right.
high-concept, interesting movie that everybody loves. Monopoly definitely could create a world like that. Something smart could come out of Monopoly, something interesting. It's possible.
Depending.
How they do it.
I didn't think Candyland could have been that awful if it was one of the PG Sandler films.
Like Bedtime Stories?
Like a Bedtime Stories or Eight Crazy Nights or something. Where, you do have all these pretty colors, and then kids go to grandma's house and they're going to, eat them, and then they go to the Gumdrop Falls, whatever. Sort of like a Willy Wonka-y type of thing.
You know what I would kind of picture almost? If you took the Candy Town area in Wreck-It Ralph and made that like a whole movie.
Okay.
That would be fun.
That would be fun.
Be nice.
That would be fun.
I mean, that was the majority of Wreck-It Ralph, so...
More or less, yeah.
Well, maybe that's why they stopped the Candyland movie.
That could
Maybe
be.
that's why we haven't heard anything in a couple of years.
Interesting.
Candyland meets
Yeah,
Mario Kart.
I didn't think of that, actually. Yeah. All right, well, just getting underway, obviously, but we'll see, when the, the Twister movie comes out. Oh, they already had the Twister movie, but it was about hurricanes, not the board game.
That is true.
So,
and then
we still have Mousetrap, man.
With Fire and
That's true. They could do Mousetrap. They could do the Game of Life. Many options. All right, well, let's move on here. We've got our triple feature of older films, and we're going to kick that off with Stories We Tell. This was created and directed by actress Sarah Polley. Stories We Tell is a documentary about her own family, specifically the relationship between her parents, Michael and Diane Polley, and the other men in Diane's life before her young death. It includes interviews with Polley's many siblings and other relatives, plus family friends that knew her mother, and it's all framed by Michael's narration of his own memoir. The reason this film was chosen for this week's new classic is because it appeared in my top 20 of 2013, but came out shortly before we started doing the show, so we never really got to talk about it. And Joe, you had never even seen it, so... Yeah. Polley sort of turns the documentary format on its ear here, not only making it about her and her own family's story, leaving out none of the gritty details, but often breaking the fourth wall and even showing us the recording of the narration and how she feels in the sound booth about what she's hearing, much of it referring to Sarah herself. The story also unfolds in a mystery-type format, with Sarah learning a lot of the new details as we go along. It's expertly crafted, and like Polley's directorial debut, The Scripted Away From Her, which we reviewed just weeks ago for the Oscar A to Z, she really knows how to find the human emotion and bring it to the forefront. Now, I can't say it's flawless. I think she does try to be a little too cutesy with the fourth wall a little too often and things like that. But it's definitely fascinating, worth a watch, and it's an A- for me. Joe?
Glad you brought this one up, actually.
Yeah. I don't think we've ever done a documentary on new classic. Oh, no, we did Sugar Man.
That's right.
Which was
great.
One of the best.
One of the greats.
I thought that even though the subject matter it wouldn't potentially be what you'd see as exciting for most documentaries, it's very engaging, and I think it's because it has that very unique aspect of being grounded in that human emotion, because it feels like we're learning about real people and real situations that I think everyone can relate to, no matter what their status in life. And I think that's something you don't really see in documentaries. Seeing something truly that grounded was actually very refreshing, and I do think that it does have this really inclusive world to it. I think it is the narration, which I think is a good cap to it to kind of frame everything. You did mention that as well, which is very interesting. And I really liked hearing these people's stories and how it does build up from the different perspectives, and it does take its time. I do think some of it's a little clunky, though, with some of the interviews, and I did think some of the humor was a bit annoying. And to be fair, I wouldn't say it's necessarily something that I would be particularly interested to hear if you hadn't shown it to me. like would have sought this out. But it still was much more interesting than I was expecting. I did enjoy it. I thought it was well edited. I would leave it with an A- as well.
Okay. Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because it's one of the few, like, quote-unquote celebrity documentaries I can think of that really no one famous is ever interviewed in the whole movie. I mean, it's all her family, her mom's friends. None of these people we are familiar with, and I thought that added an interesting touch to it as well.
That's what I liked about it the most.
Yeah.
Because you'd think with most other actors, performers, it would be all the people in
all
the
their
business
celebrity buddies.
It's like, and that kind of honestly takes it out of it a little bit, because no matter how these people are normal people as well, you see like Martin Scorsese talk, it's
right.
It's a bit of a separation.
Yeah. And it doesn't focus at all on her career.
No.
It's all about the family stuff.
Yep, it's all about her experiences.
Yeah.
And when it is there, it's usually like just to highlight
where she was in her life.
Yeah, just
Where
kind
she
of
was,
mention. Yeah, exactly. Just kind of mention. Here's where she met this guy.
Yeah.
And then we interviewed that guy.
Like I remember that. I remember them talking about her working on Mr. Nobody and getting some big news in regards to her family life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's hear from you, Justin, on stories we tell.
Absolutely. I feel like every family tree has some degree of a complicated story, but it's that exploration in regards to that motif that I think is Stories We Tell's greatest strength and most vulnerable weakness. Hearing Polly's complex history from a multitude of her family members adds a layer of intrigue, humor, and devastation, but also really begs a haunting question that honestly has bothered me ever since I originally watched it. How much of this is skewed in regards to romanticizing some elements, and which side may be the most accurate? Because we'll see that some family members remember things differently. Some have new lights, some have alternate decisions. And even though I understand where she's going with that, it also begs the question of how true is the story we're actually hearing. I like it, and honestly, I do like the fourth wall breaking. I feel like that sheds a whole new light on Polly, not only as a filmmaker, but as a human being on the side as well, which I feel like is often something we as people tend to forget in regards to people working in Hollywood. But Stories We Tell, aside from that noticeable flaw, is easily one of the most unique documentaries I've ever seen. I leave it with an A- as well.
And we all sort of said this when we did Away From Her. I mean, Polly really is a strong director. I mean, we don't know her too well as an actress. She pops up here and there. I think she's a lot better known in Canada. But she really has a knack for sort of fleshing out what needs to be fleshed out the most.
Knowing what needs to be done and how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I've seen her in a couple of things. Mr. Nobody, Dawn of the Dead, which I feel like never gets enough credit, but she does a good job in it for what it is. But to go a little bit on my thought about that theory about potential bias, how do you guys feel about that? I mean, obviously, because it's family talking to family, I feel like they're more open about it.
I definitely see your issue with it seeming genuine, like with the whole skewed perspective, but I think that's kind of adding to the whole genuine nature of the film, because the whole thing is about other people's perspectives on her and how the view of her was shaped, not necessarily just her. I think they're going for the idea of her as well as the memory. And obviously, when you have different stories mingling, it's not going to be the same thing no matter what. I think that's better than having an entire documentary with one particular perspective. This person was this way because of these things. Now, unfortunately, we can't get her side of the story, obviously.
Well, no.
So I think that what she was doing was intentional. So that's one thing I thought about it was kind of unique. Does it always mesh well? Maybe not, but it's definitely something that makes it stand out.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think that is the strongest difference in this documentary with any other, is that, if you talked to 5 or 6 or 7 of your family members, Justin, and your mom's friends about a particular subject or time in her life or whatever, I think you will get a wide variety of stories that have the same things at its core, but the details are different. And that's what we see all throughout this movie, and that's because either the stories were passed, along the generations differently, or this person, recollected something that the other person didn't, or whatever, or someone remembers it wrong. And I think that's an incredibly engaging part of this story, is that we don't necessarily know if everything is true or not. And I think that gives it a unique perspective.
And I'll agree with you on that, but I also feel like the entire mission statement straight out the gate for this movie is tell me the story of our family. And we're getting 18 different takes by the time the movie's over. I'll grant you that, and it's very well edited and very entertaining. It's just, at the same time...
But the core of the story is the same from just about everybody. It's the details that are the specific details that are different. But I mean, there are definitely subjects that almost everybody in the movie agrees on. In fact, there's a montage of them saying a specific name, and they're all saying this person's name when the mom met her,
right,
or met him. I think that's how it is. I mean, you're never going to have a family documentary where everyone's agreeing on everything. It's just not going to happen.
Everybody's got
I don't think.
It's like you said, Dan. I mean, if you have other people talking, reminiscing about like the family's history, everybody's got their own unique perspective. You know what they say, if two people see the exact same thing, they didn't see the exact same thing.
Right.
Somebody has a different viewpoint, a different way they experienced it.
And I'll give Polly this. If you see, let's say, like a music documentary, right? Like the Foo Fighters one.
Sure.
You'll see, okay, let's interview Dave Grohl. Let's interview Iggy Pop. Let's interview somebody else they worked with. And, okay, but we have one view for this documentary, Foo Fighters are great. That's which they are.
Why watch the documentary?
And right. So that's the theme. So if you have somebody saying something that contradicts what Dave Grohl's saying, well, he's the leader of the Foo Fighters. So let's just have his part in the, here, Polly takes everybody's stories and puts them in. And I think that's what makes this original.
Actually, that's a pretty unbiased documentary when you really think about it.
Yeah.
Letting everybody get a share.
No, but it's also in the formatting as well. Mm-hmm. I'd argue. So what is getting in, what isn't getting in? There are sometimes where you'll see the same like 4 people show up, and then other ones are like, "Did that really happen?" And the responses are genuine. It doesn't feel faked or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it also feels like, okay, you clearly focused on these 3 people and benched other members of your family at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the story, though, because they're from 2 separate marriages, so, I mean, all of them might not have been there for all of the things,
That's true, too.
And also, there is one part of the movie where the one sister, Sarah, like, tells her, oh, well, so-and-so remembers it this way, and the sister literally was like, well, he probably is right, like, she kowtows to that because she knows she has a faulty memory in that area or whatever. So I don't know, but you're right. It's a very genuine documentary through and through. But the differences certainly didn't bother me.
I guess it's another classic case of the devil's in the details.
Yeah, it is. All right, well, let's move on here to the old classic, and that was Joe's pick, an interesting one. Another animated one from Joe, and that is The Iron Giant.
The Iron Giant is a 1999 American animated science fiction comedy drama. Whew! Film using both traditional animation and computer animation, produced by Warner Brothers, who did something right once, and based on the 1968 novel The Iron Man by Ted Hughes, which a lot of people actually don't know about. It is. It's very different from the novel.
I was going to say,
an
extremely different story.
It's almost completely different, but the core is the same. The film was directed by Brad Bird, who shows some early promise here, I think. Scripted by Tim McCanless, and featuring the voice talents of Jennifer Aniston, Harry Connick, and Vin Diesel as the Giant. In his first big role, actually.
Yeah?
How about that? Set during the Cold War in 1957, shortly after Sputnik was launched, the film was about a young boy named Hogarth Hughes, which is probably the strangest first name I've heard in any movie.
Weird name.
Very bizarre, but
Definitely.
Certainly memorable, who discovers a giant metallic robot who fell from space. With the help of a beatnik artist named Dean, who is my favorite character, they have to stop the U.S. military and a federal agent named Kent Mansley from finding and destroying the giant. I think this film has a great Cold War commentary and genuine atmosphere for adults to appreciate. Obviously, it's got some strong anti-war themes, but a really great message about self-discovery for kids and adults. I think the animation's fantastic. I think there's some great comedy. I definitely grew up watching this one and loved certain scenes. I was pointing some out to Dan. I find myself rolling a lot. It's a sci-fi classic that would easily be an A+ for me, but there's that ending, so I leave The Iron Giant with an A.
Okay, Justin?
Well, I feel like in a cinematic era filled with kids' movies that are just loaded with cute humor and dumbed down, thank goodness for filmmakers like Brad Bird who aren't afraid to tell these complicated and thought-provoking means of family entertainment.
It's interesting you say that because at the time, they were really pushing to have this film as basically filled with musical numbers and really dumbed down.
Wow.
And Brad Bird wanted to do the movie his way, but he got lucky because Quest for Camelot, they were trying to mimic Disney. It bombed so bad, they said, you know what?
Try it your way.
Take the risk,
Yeah.
do whatever you want. So
Interesting.
Almost didn't turn out that way, actually.
Thank goodness for Quest for Camelot, then, I guess.
Yeah, how about that?
Can't say that too often.
But despite the somewhat disappointing box office take that it had way back when, it's obviously got a relatively noticeable cult following since.
Mm-hmm.
It survives thanks to a really compelling story and some strong emotional impact. And I think that's largely thanks to what I would happily argue is Diesel's best on-screen, or at least voice performance, committing to film. He, even as this gigantic robot, who still floors me to this day that it was Diesel.
Hey, he's got some talent.
He completely knocks it out of the park. I think it does get a little too dark at times, notably during the ending, and I do think the conclusion's somewhat anticlimactic in a way, but easily one of the most underrated family films. Animation's gorgeous. The use of CGI later on is implemented well, but doesn't overpower it, which I like. I wish more movies would explore that, because I think there is a role for traditional animation in Hollywood animated movies. It's just, it costs a lot, and that makes me kind of sad. But this is a really, really good movie. I wish more people would see it. I leave it with a B+.
This is one I really didn't know anything about until I worked at Hollywood Video, and that was in the mid-2000s. When this came out, like Justin said, it didn't, light up the box office or anything, sort of under the radar at the time. But then, had this huge cult following on video. And, I remember this was one of the most rented, family and kids movies that we had there. It was always flying off the shelf. And I was like, what is this Iron Giant? I don't know what this is. I never heard of it. But everybody was like, you have to watch it. You have to watch it. And I never ended up doing that until Joe showed it to me this week. And it really is just a great piece of cinema. Brad Bird always knocks it out of the park. I don't think that's a big shock. But what was shocking was the Vin Diesel performance, Justin, the Jennifer Aniston performance, which
Early.
I had to look it up because I was like, she sounds kind of familiar. Did not know that was Jennifer Aniston, and that's rare because that was at a time when
You would have known.
Well, yeah, you couldn't throw a rock without knowing. Oh, that's a Jennifer Aniston performance. She was Rachel and everything, and here she was completely different. The voice actor that did Hogarth was good. The story, though, is what is most striking about this film. It's touching. The animation is gorgeous. It's a really good movie. I actually kind of like the ending. Joe, you and I kind of discussed this when we watched it. I liked it. I can see where it's
kind of
divisive.
It's the great
for
debate.
Sure. I can see why it's divisive. But I'm going to leave the Iron Giant with an A.
Okay.
I really, really enjoyed it. I think this is right up there probably with Mulan for all of the animated movies you've shown this show.
Yeah, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the ending because I think okay, don't get me wrong, I get it because Justin's right. The movie's pretty heavy, even for kids. There's a lot of stuff that they might not necessarily get, but it's a very dark family film, but still lighthearted somehow, which I think is a good balance for sure. It's kind of following, I think, in the trail of Don Bluth in a lot of ways.
More or less.
So I get the ending, but I feel like there was a way to end it respectably and happily without doing it exactly the way they did, because I just feel like that cheapens it a little bit.
I agree with both sides, because it did take me a little while to come around on it, because I think when we watched it, I was sort of with you. I was like, I don't know. But I get why they had to do it.
Well, yeah.
Well, they didn't have to, but why they chose to do it, I should say.
Because, it wouldn't have... people wouldn't have been quite as...
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think they could have been, though. I think that... I feel like there was a way they could have pulled it off.
Possibly.
Maybe it would have been a little too bittersweet. What do you think, Justin? I know you thought that... You probably thought it was necessary. Anticlimactic, but necessary, maybe?
That's probably the best way to phrase it. The situation that they're put in at the end, there really is no other way to do it than that. It's just kind of, if you're going to end it there, end it on an ambiguous note.
Yeah, like I think
I wouldn't have minded that.
I think you can have hope. I'm not saying you shouldn't end the movie with hope. I get that, but I don't think you should clearly say it's kind of negated. I mean, it wasn't negated because what happened and could have turned out another way. But I don't know. I think it's a little more powerful to leave it the way it was because it was such a good ending to that character's arc. You know.
What is the major differences between the book and the movie?
Just about everything.
Yeah,
Is that right?
It's literally like kid finds giant. The giant goes and attacks people. And
I was going to say that the giant is not at first friendly. It's sort of like a Godzilla sort of arc.
and the kid has to kind of convince him to be good as opposed to him, kind of forgetting. But obviously, with the intent of the giant originally, maybe.
I'll give you the primary example I remember from my childhood. The climactic battle at the end is between the giant and another monster sitting on Australia.
So yeah,
That's interesting.
it goes a very different direction. It's loosely based on it, but the main story is still the same.
Okay.
The main idea.
So this is more for kids than maybe the book is.
I'd probably say the latter, actually.
Really?
Well, there's the Cold War commentary and everything is pretty heavy in this movie, and
That's true.
It's definitely more for adults, I think, which is fine. I think everyone can enjoy this movie.
Yeah, I think so too. It's actually quite like a Pixar movie in that regard, which is no surprise with Brad Bird being involved.
Definitely.
But you're right. It works on levels for kids and adults.
It's a very well balanced movie.
Warner Brothers had a lot going on in the animation department. I guess mostly on TV with Animaniacs and the Batman series and.
I mean, when it comes to animation, they're no slouches, but I guess they just struggled a bit with Disney in the box office.
Well, yeah, I guess so, because they really don't make animated movies anymore. I can't think of the last one. I mean, I guess they still do Batman ones direct to DVD.
True.
But in terms of big theatrical releases like something like this, no.
I can't think of anything.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a shame.
Well, and I really, I just agree with Justin. Like, I really miss some of that traditional animation, like the good old 2D stuff. It could still look great. I feel like we shouldn't completely abandon it. I mean, we shouldn't have to go to Japan to find any of it. You know, I mean, like, there has to be...
Studio Ghibli can't be the be-all, end-all.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's a shame.
It's a shame. But, hey, this is a classic, and people love it, so...
Yeah.
It's not going away.
Very true. Okay, well, up next and up final, we have our Oscar A to Z. And Babel is a 2006 film nominated for 7 Oscars. That's what we're going to be tackling this week. It was up for editing and score, plus 5 of the biggies. Original screenplay, 2 for supporting actors. You don't see that too often. Best director and best picture. Justin?
Told from several interconnected stories across the world, such as in Morocco, where Richard and Susan Jones, played by Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett, are vacationing when their bus gets ambushed from an unseen assailant, to Mexico, where the Joneses' nanny, Amelia, tries to go to Mexico in time for her son's wedding. Meanwhile, in Japan, social outcast Chaiko Wataya, played by Rinko Kikuchi, tries to deal with her innermost frustrations and the trauma of her mother's suicide, as well as her distant father. This was my first main encounter with Alejandro González Iñárritu's work, and all I can say then is the same thing I say now. Wow. I won't pretend that this film doesn't get heavy-handed at times, and Blanchett, unfortunately, never really gets much to do in this one, but it manages to tell a believable and complex story and make it flow seamlessly into each other. Even when it's not always the most engrossing, I never felt bored, and I was always curious to see how each story was going to tie into each other and really, really fit. And I feel like even though some don't really come together until the very, very end, seeing how those pieces do come together in the entire end game is really what makes this movie work so well. You see how all the narrative beats build up to each other. The acting, some are better than others. Kikuchi is fantastic. Unfortunately, she's probably only on screen for about half an hour, I'd argue. Yeah. But I mean, this is a really solid work. I feel like it's a very realistic work, and I would argue it's not quite as heavy-handed as other films that have tried the interconnected thing, like Crash, that are strictly trying to like hit a message. This one's just trying to give us this commentary on how people can be connected in the most unlikely of ways. And I think that's really bold. I leave Babel with an A.
Joe, what do you think?
I believe that this is a movie about misunderstandings. divided by culture or language or geography. But as Justin said, everybody's connected, and this movie attempts to demonstrate this and does it rather well, I think. It definitely has ambition, and it's enhanced by wonderful cinematography and some pretty good performances. The problem for me was that I think some of the stories are more compelling than others, and I do think it does drag a little bit at points, honestly. But it's, for the most part, pretty enjoyable. I just wish it had been a little less heavy-handed and could maybe cut it down a little bit. But for the most part, I liked what this movie was trying to say. I leave it with a B+.
I think this movie is all over the place. Joe, I agree. I think that some plots are more interesting than others, and the acting is okay. There's good performances in it. Justin, I agree. Kate Blanchett is like, she gets hit by on the bus like almost right away, like their first or second scene, and then she's just kind of out of it the rest of the movie. She doesn't get to show us the classic Kate, the classic Kate Blanchett.
Better.
Yeah.
Better well.
That's true. I think the performances are alright. I think the stories intersect okay, but it's far too long for what gets accomplished here. So I like what it is trying to say. I agree with that, but there needed to be something else. Either make the stories a little more engaging, or make them all as engaging as the last, or make them intersect a little better. To me, this is just one huge Oscar bait movie. It is shot well. I'll give you guys that. It's a B for me. I really thought it was too long, just not as engaging as I would have liked it. So you thought, Justin, all the stories were pretty much on par with each other. You liked all of them?
I feel like they're all interesting at different times. Sort of like how you two felt about Snatch. They're not always on par with each other at a certain time, but they all have their moments, I think, would be my argument.
I could agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can agree that on a basic level, yes, all of these stories are interesting, but maybe not what is done with them, or maybe how long it takes to get to certain ones, or that kind of thing.
I feel like some of the connectivity between the stories, like, really demonstrated how obvious the connections were. Like, there was something that profoundly affected somebody else over here, and there were other stories where I thought it was just kind of barely connected. It's okay, well, that happened. I mean, for me, I always really like the Tokyo storyline. I really do.
No, it's a great great segment.
It's my favorite, honestly. But I feel like it has the least to do with the rest of the movie. Like, I mean, I feel like the stuff in Morocco, and the perceptions about how circumstances could lead to somebody thinking, okay, it's a terrorist attack, but there's a whole lot more going on, okay, and this affects the family over there, and it's affecting this woman, her life in Mexico, which was also interesting. And then you come back to Japan, where it's like, oh, well, this is kind of where a lot of that started, the trouble, but her story doesn't really
It doesn't connect as much as anything.
It's like, okay, like,
no, but I mean, you can have a loose connection so long as the pieces fit.
Yeah, I know, and other movies have done that, and that's fine. I mean, I do like some movies where it's like the only connection is maybe like a certain object.
Mm-hmm. Like I was gonna say, 13 Conversations About One Thing,
yes.
Magnolia.
Yeah, I like those movies because of that, but they are only connected due to minor things. But each of those people, there's an overlying theme, I think, that is pretty consistent with those movies. Whereas this one,
you don't think so?
Well, I think there is definitely the whole human element. Obviously, like, they are all struggling in their own way. But in terms of, I feel like this one was trying to say that these particular instances all directly affected that, because there was a correlation. But
you said it yourself, and frankly, rather well. This is a movie very much centered around misunderstandings.
Yeah. And
how one can influence the other and vice versa.
Yeah.
Is it always the most direct? No, but then again, now there's life in that regard.
No,
yeah, I can't deny that.
No, that's true. I just think that some of the connections were handled better in certain storylines other than with others. And I think if you're going to do that, keep it consistent. If you want to say, okay, there's this one element that is roughly connected, that's fine. Or, hey, if there's some grand meaning in all of it where this is a direct correlation, you can do that. But
just tighten it up a little, though,
too. Just a little bit. I just feel like it meanders a little, too.
But I also feel like if you did super tighten it up, you'd ruin some of the main surprises with the connections. Because I feel like piecing the mystery together of how these stories are connected is half the entertainment value of this movie.
I think
Yes.
for me, I would say the most entertaining thing is the individual stories because I don't know. I thought that each of them could be compelling, but
Yeah.
I didn't particularly care that they were connected. It's almost like you could have like vignettes, which would be fine. You know, I just think I think personally the mystery plot is.
Ordinarily, I'd agree with you. The only reason why I'm not is I saw Babel when it was well past Oscar season and it was already established what it was. This gigantic everything is connected story. So I already had that in my head. So I'm like, okay, if you're gonna be this interconnected story, I might as well play ball by your mission statement.
All
Right.
right. Well,
Okay.
I didn't know that going in.
I didn't either.
I hated it when I saw it the first time.
Oh, is that right?
I thought it was incredibly boring. So I was glad I gave it a rewatch. It wasn't quite as bad this time around. But yeah, I had a difficult time with it the first time.
So much better on a rewatch.
Yeah, I'd say it was probably like a C plus or B minus originally.
Okay. Due to knowing how it was structured the second time?
I think I went into it with just a different perspective. It's one thing where you see a trailer, you have a certain perception. I mean,
Right.
I watched it when I was like 17, so who knows what I thought. I think I appreciated more of the pieces individually. I think back then it was like there were one or two stories I really liked. The other two I didn't care about at all. This time around I cared a little more. That
Okay.
helped. So I was able to see the balance and the appreciation for the stories, but I still think some are better than others.
I would agree with that. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for the show this week. You can check out all of Joe's videos on the Merlin channel. Always something new there. And we keep getting subscribers on our channel. We definitely appreciate that, so keep them coming. If you have a friend that might be interested in the show, tell them and subscribe to our channel here. And you can check us out on the Facebook group as well, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and our Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. That's going to do it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. Bye!